great to be here with Ian Marry, manager of Airdrie. Hi there, Ian.
How you doing?
Good, good. So how are you getting on with this lockdown?
Yeah, like everyone else, adapting to it over the weeks, the months, the days. And now like everyone else, it's not been working effectively. I'm dying to get back, and I've enjoyed the time off. I'm not going to lie, and I've used it to really do my own stuff, if I'm being truthfully honest, in terms of getting fit again and getting myself freshened up for what's going to be a really intense, condensed season for us all. So we need to be going back and make sure we're ready physically and mentally, so we can give it a real full 100% effort.
Brilliant, brilliant. So if we go back just to you, probably from you growing up and get into football, how did you get into football? Was it a family thing, just playing with your mates? Or?
Yeah, quite a big mixture. I was brought up in a Hibs household with my dad. I was at games, very young age, 3-4 years old, going to places like, I remember going to places like Dunfermline, Clydebank. So I watched live football from a really young age, which really gave me the bug for it. And it's not like now where everybody's sitting down in nice seats and all that. I remember sitting on terraces picking grass and listening to the roars. I remember going to a Scotland-England game actually when I was 8, and I didn't see the game because I was too small. But I was still around the environment, around the vibe. Going on a supporters bus to Glasgow, standing outside a pub waiting for my dad, going to the game, and it was brilliant. And as I say, I didn't see much football.
But those are the days, isn't it? I always use, you might have seen that quote from Bobby Robson, and he's talking about what you exactly said, when you're walking up the terracines with holding your dad's hand and you hear the roar and it's just like, when you fall in love with the game, and that's what it's all about, isn't it, really? So
yeah, that's what it is. And especially at Easter Road, at the old terrace, and at the time you could shift ends and get close to one goal, get close to the next goal, and it was all about your team. You didn't have any care in the world for the other team. You wanted to, you recognised some really good players at the time and all that, but I think you probably felt slightly closer to the players back then. The ball would come in the crowd all the time. There's no ball boys, and you would hand it back, and you would have time for a quick one-liner. That's gone now. Really, it's gone. But that was my sort of into professional football, of watching it. And then in terms of playing it, my brother was slightly older than me, 3 years, so he started playing boys club before me, but we both started playing at school. Then with our friends all the time. Every night we were out playing. Again, slightly changed days. And then I started playing boys club football in Edinburgh, and that was kind of the start of me going into football as myself.
How, I've spoken to a lot of people about this kind of, the street football culture, how, I suppose probably we all did it growing up with your mates and just playing until you got shouted in for your tea and that. How important do you think that street football and playing with your mates and probably playing with boys older than you was for, learning the game?
Yeah, it was hugely important. When I look back, it was important for lots of different reasons that you don't know at the time. We played on concrete roads, for example, and I was in goals quite a lot because I loved being in goals, and I was diving about in concrete without a care in the world. Playing with older guys, playing with younger guys, playing with girls joined in. So people go on now about women's football and equality. It was happening 20 years ago. We just didn't know it, and we didn't recognise it. So nowadays you don't see it very often, which is a shame. But again, cultural and social circumstances have dictated that to an extent. And I think actually, just to touch back on lockdown briefly with it, I was thinking yesterday, I was walking and I seen a lot of kids out on their own with their mates and had their phones now. And I thought, one thing at lockdown is it's probably got younger people closer together because they've missed each other so much. And I think it's made the elder people, or the older people, if you like, look out a little bit more for everybody. So that's a positive thing, but I understand why, it's not as common as it used to be.
I often think, I was speaking to someone else about this, about as well as learning the game when you're playing with your mates. I travelled a lot when, in my teenage years, really, and that ability to talk about football, I could go to any country in the world and people knew Kenny Dalglish and Graham Souness. And if you could play football, you immediately made mates straight away. And I think it's an unbelievable gift football gives you, isn't it?
It is. I remember being in Spain and with my dad and brother were going to the new camp on a family holiday. And again, taxi driver, wants to talk about football. Now, you might not have heard of Hibs or whoever, but you've certainly heard of Rangers and Celtic. So you've got an instant connection, and then you'll move on to maybe Steve Archibald because he's Scottish. So the conversation grows, and you find a common denominator that you can chat about, be it 5 minutes or 1 hour. So it's a wonderful thing to be involved in, and a wonderful thing that you meet people, know someone, and eventually you'll get back to someone of the original starting point. So it's great, it's wonderful on the social side, and also learning about other things in other places as well.
Yeah, superb. And when you were coming into the youth professional setup, what coaches influenced you? Who influenced you through that when you were growing up?
Well, I had a huge influence, non-professional, from Hutchie Vale in Edinburgh, and also I moved to Dundee United as a 15-year-old. So before I went full-time at Hibs, and that's a different story. But I learned a lot from a lot of people. I was a 15-year-old kid getting changed next to guys like Maurice Malpass, Dave Bowman, managers like Tommy McLean, Billy Kirkwood, Jim McLean, goodness me. He was very hands-on, very hands-on, and they were all huge influences on me. When I went into the youth team at Hibs, obviously Donald Park was the manager. He was also my Scotland under-16 assistant manager. So he was a huge influence, but I was very, very fortunate to have so many. Ross Maffey, George Mackey, all really intelligent men in football. But overall, Donald was the one who really, at that age, is kind of taking you under his wing, trying to help you get into the first team. So I'd be doing Donald a disservice, a huge disservice, if I didn't say that Donald was the one that taught me up till that point, by far the biggest influence.
Yeah, brilliant. And what was it about Parky that that influenced you? How in what ways did he influence you in the game?
Again, cultures have changed. And, I never was Donald or was in that youth team or worked with Parky around that time. Donald had a brilliant knack of being old school, but evolving into new school a wee bit. That we all got a dig on the arm now and again, and a kick up the ass now and again. But it was all, when you look back, building us up, make sure our jobs were done properly, make sure we didn't slack off. Just teaching us a bit of discipline and a little bit of respect. And also in the football side of it, he was excellent at one-on-ones. He would maybe let you play 9v9 for 20 minutes at the end of training, but then he would maybe pull one or two of us and show us things, and then you take that into your sort of try and take that into your head, and then in your next session or your further the ladder you went.
Have you been I always get the impression, Ian, that you were always pretty kind of single-minded and disciplined about where you wanted to go as well. Were you always like that, or did other people help you?
I was actually discussing this with an ex-teammate of mine the other day, actually, because we grew up in the same team. And I don't think, I think we're pretty fair saying neither of us were the best players in the team. We had a lot of good players in that team. But I was the first one to leave Hutchie Vale.
Right.
Believe it or not, I was probably, I wasn't sought after. I wasn't coveted by many clubs, but Dundee United offered me the chance to move to the, at the time it was the SPF, or the SPL Youth Initiative League in the West. And it was quite a big thing. But I'd done it. And back at the time, I can't remember it being a huge decision for me. But I still took that initial step and broke away from my friends, from a team that I enjoyed, a successful team that was going to be even more successful, but I felt that was the right thing to do. And then further on in my career, when I was asked to go in by Hibs, I had to make the decision to leave Dundee United, and there was a bit of complications in that at the time. But it was there you go. And then again, further down my career, when I went to Rangers from Hibs, that was the biggest decision I had to make. But, you know, a couple of people around me, you know, sorted that out pretty quick in terms of, no, this is definitely the right decision. And then, that was it.
Because that must have been a right good team you were at Hibs at that point, wasn't it? There was a lot of good players at that Hibs youth team.
When I broke into the Hibs team, it was I was slightly ahead of the rest of the guys like Riordan, O'Connor, Thompson, Brown, Fletchers of the world. They were slightly younger than me. I broke into a really good Hibs team. We'd Latapi, Soze, Dirk Lehman, David Zatelli, Gary Smiths. Good footballer, really good players, and with a great manager in Alec McLeish. So I broke into a really hard team to break into. But once you were in, they looked after you. Once they trusted you, they looked after you. But I trained with the first team for about 18 months before I'd even kicked the ball. So I'd earned the trust in training because I trained as I played. And obviously Alec at the time was a young manager at a big club, hard taskmaster, but him as well, he really developed me as a player. I think he thought he maybe could have developed me more, but then I think it got to a point where he probably said, like, let him go with what he's got and see what happens. And then he obviously went to Rangers and re-signed me, so I'd done something right. And that was that was kind of where I went.
If you think to then your experiences in the youth setup, what would be the advice you would give to any young player coming through, the setups now?
Oh, it's a tough question because, I hear a lot of kids now, 15 years old, get released, say of, let's just say Dundee, and you'll hear themselves and their parents say, "Oh, he's been at Dundee for 8 years," and that, to put it bluntly, no, he's not. He's not. He's just not. So I think it's about being calm. Not getting too far ahead of yourself, realising where you need to work or what you need to work on, and also don't neglect things you're not very good at. Because you can improve them a little bit, but there will be many ups and downs. You'll have ups and downs throughout your career, but especially at that age, 15, 16, 17, you're going through a lot mentally with schoolwork, with home life. You've also got to grow, your body's changing. So you're going to have some terrible, terrible dips. And it's all about, again, just being calm, regardless if you're having a fantastic period or if you're having a poor period. Try to find that consistency level is really, really important.
I think that's a great message. And I think it's a message that isn't heard enough, that word you used there, Ian, consistency. And it's quite a hard thing to say at 14, 15, 16, isn't it? Because you've got the teenage years, plus really you're growing up, isn't it? And then you've got your football in the middle of it, isn't it? God.
Yeah, I mean, people maybe don't realise, but for me anyway, the ages of 15 to probably 20-ish, 21, where you feel like you're becoming a man, if you like. I wouldn't say you miss out on anything, but you sacrifice certain things that other kids don't. But that's a decision you make at the time. And I mean, we've all heard the stories of the guy in the pub who's the best player in the world, but nobody cares, even if you were. Nobody cares. It's a kuda scenario. You need to be strong in the head. You need to be really focused on what you're doing.
And how did you find then going from Hibs to Rangers? Did you notice a change, or was it really pretty natural for you?
I noticed it was natural in the sense that I was fortunate I knew players there through the Scotland setup, and I knew the manager, which I'd worked with the manager before, so that was important for me. And Andy Watson, the assistant, and a few other coaches that were in the background had been at Hibs in certain capacities. Again, when I left Hibs, we were kind of getting back to a decent side because we had Gary O'Connor, Derek, Kevin, Scott Brown, With, Rob Jones was coming in at the time, but I left in that summer. But obviously the standard of play at Rangers was better. There's no question about that. The facilities were better. I'd never trained at a training centre before. I'd walked into Murray Park, and I remember signing for Rangers the day I went through, and I felt really, as much as I loved playing for Hibs and they were my team, I was, proud to have signed for Rangers, and felt that all my hard work at that point had finally, got me to a level where I could, say, "Oh, I've done okay now."
Yeah, and I know, when you went to Rangers there, you had challenge with the injuries. How did you get through that? How hard was it, and how did you get through it?
Yeah, it was a very strange. I mean, I only had one injury, and it wasn't even an injury, quite frankly. I remember I'd done a lot of travelling in that summer. I'd been to Paris to watch the Champions League final because Arsenal had got in it, and I was an Arsenal supporter at the time, or I liked them. I'd been to Greece, I'd been to Japan with the national team, and we were in South Africa with Rangers, and I'd been fine. I had a wee sore knee, just a wee twinge. It was nothing major or anything like that. But I remember we stopped at a stopover on the way home from South Africa, and I felt fluey, just knackered. By the time I got back to Edinburgh, the next day I woke up and my body was just stiff as a board. I was like, "God, what's going on?" And then it just it never really got any worse. It was just the same, and I couldn't do anything. And we were actually playing Middlesbrough on the Saturday in a friendly, and I tried to train on the Friday. That's my mentality. I was trying. I just had to pull my hand up and say, "This is, I'm miles away." So it was diagnosed as a sort of, reactive arthritis, if you like, and I was told it could take 6 months to 2 years. Luckily for me, it was 6 months, and it disappeared as quickly as it came. So really bizarre feeling, and I've touched wood, I've never had any problems with it since.
Great. How hard was it to deal with it at the time, or was it something, especially like that, you said it just came, but it lasted for a while? How did mentally you get through every day? Did you think it would change, or did you have to just be patient?
Yeah, I always believed it would change. I never thought. I mean, it was probably worse for my wife, my family, my mum, my dad to see it rather than myself, because I felt it'll go away.
Brilliant.
I'm 24. I'm not 94. So I didn't panic, and maybe there was days I had days when I was down, and God, will this ever? There was days I couldn't open the door. And again, when I went back into the group with the players, they were saying, "Oh goodness, Ned, you were looking like an old man." I didn't feel that. I didn't feel that myself. But I just, again, I know it sounds silly because football is such a volatile game, but when you've got that much time on your hands and that much thinking time, you just have to stay calm and believe that you'll get better. And if you don't, then of course it'd be a terrible situation. But you can't think like that when you're trying to get better. You can't think you're not going to get better.
I know.
And I was surrounded by great medical people as well. I was very fortunate.
I think it's a very level-headed approach, though, as well, because I as well as the football, I've worked in downhill Olympic skiing, and a lot of these guys and women have bad injuries and come back, and you notice how the ones get through it. That, like you said there, it's almost stoic in terms of, I believe I'll get there and I'll deal with every day as it comes. And I think when you look at dealing with injuries, especially for young players now, it's because the medical profession, and we notice more now. Would you say we notice more in terms of our body, what could go wrong in the game?
Yeah, I think we notice more because we're probably, everybody's a little bit, well, not everybody, a vast majority now are more self-conscious of how they look. Gyms even, gyms weren't around 20, like they are now. They weren't around 25 years ago, or they were just becoming things. So I think we are. I think we definitely are. And I think we're also getting more care as well. I think with more information comes more care, comes more remedies, comes more answers, if you like. So overall, we're definitely noticing more. But again, we're getting a lot of help from like gyms opening up, for example, has helped people get fit. They're helping you with nutrition if you want. They're doing single plans, group it's all out there now.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. Do you think when you look back, Ian, from before we move on from the injury, that I think that going through that allows you to empathise with your players now that are going through an injury, especially something that's longer term?
Yeah, I mean, I had last season with a young player who had lots of talent. Looked okay, probably to the naked eye. Excuse me. But he was telling me something wasn't quite right.
Yeah.
And I knew the area of the body, I'd had a similar issue. I knew something wasn't right with me in that time. And nobody would tell me what it was. So the poor guy ended up going to different opinions. Again, not the people that have told him's fault, but it's just the way his head was thinking at the time. And I remember taking him into the office before a game, and I said, "Look, I'm going to make this easy for you. You're done in terms of I'm not selecting you. Period. I want you to go away and get your injury sorted out." And the relief, I could see it off him. He came in the door really low. He bounced out the door. And that's exactly what I needed at the time. And when I got told my diagnosis of my hip when I was 29, 30, I'll never forget the doctor saying, "There's good news and bad news. The good news is you're not lying." And I thought, cheeky, but never mind. And he said, "The bad news is your hip's pretty done in terms of you can still manage it, but long term," he says, "that's going to need complete replacement." But I was delighted because I was like, "Oh my God, it's not in my head. I could feel it. I knew I wasn't right. I knew it." So I learned from my experience. I learned to deal with that with my player last season, and fingers crossed. I believe what I'm hearing, he's coming back absolutely superb. So I'm really delighted for him.
That's a great example of that as well. So from your playing, were you always interested in coaching here? Did you always have an interest in coaching?
I wouldn't say interested in coaching because I didn't really understand what coaching was, even as a player. So you get coached. Alec McLeish was great for me, centre half for Scotland, centre half for Aberdeen, man mountain of a guy, experience, coming out his ears, won the leagues, cups. So he used to coach me. I didn't know. I knew he was trying to get me better. But I didn't really understand the sort of delicacies of it all, and the delicate areas that, silly tiny little things that would save me a lot of bother later on in my career. It was only really until about maybe 29ish I started to really realise things were evolving, because by that point I was back at Hibs, and they had transformed from being a team that went to train in public parks to a training centre with sports science, jacuzzis, steam rooms. Again, progression, and with that we all learned as well.
Great. And how did you make the transition into coaching from playing? What was your decision making there?
Again, you could go back to be it single-mindedness, a little bit of luck, a little bit of whatever. I was actually out of contract at Hibs. I'd been training with Dunfermline for a number of weeks. It was one of the ones, we want to sign you, we want to sign you, nothing ever came. Brechin wanted me to go and play a couple of games for them. My hip was sore, didn't feel great, and I thought, oh God, I want to go and play, and one last hurrah. And I did. I went and played for them for a game, and I actually played. I played as well as I could have played, and I played well, but we got beat, and I thought, God, this is, and I'd actually committed to go to the States for 3 months with I had a contact over there, and I've always wanted to go and coach kids in the States. For the various reasons, I never got the opportunity over the summer, like, getting married, having kids, going on holiday, so I got a call out the blue from a guy called Matt Brown, and he offered me a sort of 8 to 9 week period of coaching the kids. He wasn't sure because it was a visa problem with someone else. So whenever I got that sorted out, I would go. So I went over there for ended up being 10 weeks, and then I had a 2-week holiday with the kids and down in Florida. Yeah. And that was part of the kind of deal that I could get to go and do it. So when I was there, I applied for 2 jobs in the States. When I checked BBC Sport Scotland, as you do, and I see 2 jobs were up. So I applied for 2. I didn't get a reply from one. Yeah. And then Dumbarton was the other one. Yeah. And I honestly applied purely to test the water of where I was. Yeah. So when I got a call back to say we'd like to interview you, I was like, oh, well, now we've got a problem because I'm in America. Yeah. So did my interest look genuine? Did it not? Yeah. I wasn't sure. I mean, it was. Yeah. And then I said, look, I'm really happy, delighted to be offered an interview, but unfortunately, my family's flying over next week. I'm not back for 3 weeks or 2 weeks. I thank you for your time, but that's the end of it. And they said, look, we need to move on. I said, no problem. Yeah. And then I got a call about 10 days later, are you still interested? I said, well, of course, but you know my situation. Yeah. So they said, no, it's okay, we'll wait. And I said, right, okay, so can you come on Tuesday night? And I said, I'm sorry, I fly in too late to get there on Tuesday. I'll come Wednesday. Yeah. And I was the manager by Thursday. So brilliant. And we were moving house on the Saturday because I was out of work. Yeah. Suddenly I said, I was delighted, but I said, that's me, I've got a game. Got a game. I've went from nothing to everything. And I'd signed as player manager there, but I knew I was going to struggle with that. Yeah. But I felt I could give them enough as manager to justify it, and that was the start of it, really. Yeah. Did you really enjoy, being the manager there straight away? Did you enjoy everything about that, the whole role? I enjoyed it. Once I was sitting down in the office and had my own thoughts, I enjoyed it. But I also remember thinking, what do I do? Yeah. Because I have got no experience of this. Yeah. We're in the Championship as well. We're at a decent level. Don't get me wrong, we're rooted to the bottom of the league, and the boys were struggling and whatever. But I thought, we're in the Championship. We really, really need to make sure the players realise they deserve to be where they are. Yeah. And regardless of what anybody says about Scottish football, Premier League, we're in the second tier of our national sport. It was that simple for me. So to get the belief into the players that you are where you are because you deserve to be where you are. Don't be scared. Don't be thinking anyone's better than you. Of course, there's teams that are going to beat you and players that will do this, but we are here and we can get out of this situation that we're in. Yeah. And then the weather was really bad that year in Scotland over the winter. Because I was up end of October, November, I took that job. We played Hamilton in the Scottish Cup. Hamilton were top of the league, or second top, and they beat us 3-1. But they gave us a good hiding that night. And I remember Billy Reid saying to me after the game, he was being polite, I think, when he puffed his cheeks and said, oh, hard work down here. And I was like, and we played them 6 weeks later and beat them 2-0. And he was like, oh, what have you done? And I said, honestly, Billy, I've done nothing. Yeah. All I've done is I've sorted them out in terms of, I've got them a couple of things, but it's the same team. Yeah. It's the same team. Yeah. So that belief let us go and gave me a great. We won 4 out of our first 5 against the top 5. It gave us a huge belief. It must have given you a belief in as well that you could do it as well, Ian. Did it? Getting that start. It probably gave me. Sorry again. Yeah. It probably gave me. The belief that how I thought football was, because as much as I played in great teams, at Hibs and Rangers and stuff, I wouldn't have said I played in a team that was coached in any way, apart from Tony Mowbray's team, which was really good football. We weren't coached in any way to play great football. We were coached to win. Yeah. And that's where I did realise coaching. Everything to me was, how do we win the game on the Saturday? Yeah. As a player. And as a manager, I was the same. We all like to see lovely football. We all want to get the ball about, but we weren't that team at Dumbarton. We had get up to the top end of the pitch as quick as we can, because in the top end we could play good football, but to get there for us was really difficult. And that's kind of where I am still now with that, because you have to work with the players you have, and you have to, play football to the league you're in.
Yeah.
So I don't have a huge urge to change that overnight, but progression will come. I just think that particular period in that club gave me again a real sense of calmness, because we weren't a team that won every week.
Yeah.
So we had to deal with getting beat, and we did deal with that. Once you deal with defeat and acceptance of defeat, it actually progresses you further down the line. There's many. You look at Liverpool, for example. 5 years, not won the league for 30 years because it's taken them so many defeats and so many disappointments, but they got there in the end.
Yeah, I think that's a great point you're making. I was speaking to James McPake about a month or so ago, and he was speaking about that in terms of learning to deal with defeat as a manager, learning it as well, because the emotion's there, isn't it? A huge emotion. And the question I suppose to ask you is, what do you think the difference? How did you feel a difference between feeling the emotions between success and winning and losing? Was it different as a coach to a player?
Yeah, it's totally different every week, every day, really, because what you want out of a session might be what the players, they can go home and you're analysing because it's your session. You go, why did I not do this? Why did I not do that? Oh, that's a good idea. Oh, that was really bad. Players looked like they were bored, and stuff like that. And it's the same as a manager. I think I learned to deal with the wins as well quite calmly. Because I was so tired after games. If we were winning 3-0 a few minutes ago, my first thought wasn't how many beers can I drink. My first thought was, I'm getting down that tunnel first because there's only 3 baths. And now as a manager, I go in and we win and I go, relax, relief. And then I check the opposition straight away for next week. How did they get on? What formation did they play? So I probably get a bigger kick on the Sunday than I do on the Saturday night. Because I've had a sleep and I've watched the game back and I've seen good points, but I've also seen bad points that we can work on. So totally different as a manager to a player, but
I think you have to do that though, Ian, in a lot of ways, because if not, you're on that total emotional roller coaster, aren't you? And it's far less. Although you're the manager, you're not on the park, isn't it? It's less controllable, isn't it?
Oh, it's people will say, well, the manager, can do this, that. What the manager can do in that 90 minutes, yes, he can make a decision, sub a player on, so it might work, it might not. If it works, brilliant. If it doesn't, it's your fault, but you're not in control at all. And you're actually sometimes in a worse position than the fans, because you're seeing it at a level. Sometimes all you see is heads and bodies. You don't see the overview of space, time, decisions, and you can get wrapped up in something that might look really obvious in the stand can look really, really close down where I am. And before you know it, you've shot off at the linesman, you've shot off at the referee, and you look it back and you go, oh God, no, they were right. They were right. So to try and keep calm in that 90 minutes is really, really difficult. And after the games, I'm exhausted.
I could imagine.
I feel like if my body's tensed up. I feel like I've kicked every ball. So I don't think that'll ever leave me. I've seen managers who are very, very calm on the sideline, but it tends to be the guys who are top of the league.
Yeah, that's a good point. That is. I'm very calm and controlled when I'm at the top. How have you found? If we skip ahead, we were speaking about you being in Norway. How did you find the different culture when you went over to Norway and worked over there? Yeah,
brilliant place actually. It's again, maybe it goes back to single-mindedness, because when I was speaking to Kevin Nichol, obviously took me over, and a lot of people over there and a lot of British people were saying it takes about 2 years to adapt to the culture. Probably took me about 6 to 7 months. And just before I came back, actually, out of the blue as well, I was getting into a real Norwegian lifestyle and really starting to say, right, well, this could be it. This could be where I am for the rest of my life, because it's a great place to be.
Yeah.
It's not far from the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
Football's good. I was working with Kevin, who was superb in what he'd done. I was working with good people. So culturally, it is completely and utterly different. It really is. But it's really, really interesting as well.
What's different about it? What would you say the main points, if you could pull anyone out?
It's a hard one to describe, Norrie. I can't remember the commandments that they live by, but there's a nation, as a nation, they live by these commandments. And one of them I remember is humbleness. Never think you're better than anyone.
Yeah.
And they take that to the letter over there.
Yeah.
They don't care how good you are. If you're not a good person, you can forget it. You can leave the country. You're not wanted. So they have very, very strict rules that work. And I wouldn't say people are petrified to break them, but people are so respectful that they won't break them. And the playing side and the player side, I found what they wanted was constant information, constant analysis. Not always positive. They wanted to know their bad points. They were very strong people, very single-minded. Really, really good nation. Obviously fell away a little bit football-wise, like Scotland, but they seem to be creeping up again, which is good.
So if we're I know you're at Airdrie just now managing as well. So when you look back, because I think you've had a lot of experience already, and it's superb, really, isn't it? Because I don't know if you agree with this. I don't think you can shortcut experience either in playing or in coaching, isn't it? You have to go through a lot of different things, I think.
I mean, I obviously got the Dumbarton job, a rookie manager, and probably people thought, and I accept that. I look at it and go, God, I was very fortunate. Within that job, I made millions of mistakes out the spotlight. It was Dumbarton. I made some shocking decisions, but I was, getting them out of me. Then I went to St Mirren, made more mistakes there in the spotlight. So, I was out of work for maybe, what would it be, about, I think it was about a year. I wouldn't say I didn't lose my hunger or my belief, but I needed a step back. I'd actually knocked back a couple of jobs at the time. But number one, I thought I was above them, which was completely wrong when I look back. And number two, my energy wasn't there. My energy my drive wasn't there. So going over to Norway gave me huge hunger. Nobody knew me, so I got away from people speaking to me, or at games the fans don't interact like they do over here. And then that kind of gave me the belief again. And at the point where I actually I was thinking about my Norwegian culture and lifestyle that 18 months. I actually remember not long again before I came back, because I'd knocked back a couple of jobs, and I'd also been knocked back for a job about 6 months before that. It hurt me at the time, because my father had passed away and all this stuff, so I was kind of looking to maybe get back closer to home. And then obviously the Airdrie job came out the absolute blue, and I had to make the decision: what do I want to do? Do I want to be a football manager? Because if you keep knocking jobs back or not going for jobs, then you don't want to be one, and you can sit here and see what happens. But I made a decision early in my head of that brief conversation I had with myself, that I needed to be a manager again, and that's what I wanted to do.
Brilliant. I think it's a great example here, which you've just said, of emotional intelligence, or you trusting your energy, about where you want to go and what you're doing. And I think sometimes it's so useful, isn't it, for us to get out of the place we're used to, whether it's a country or a culture, and go and almost, it's a cliche, and it's a cliche because it's true, and get back in touch with what you love again, and redefine yourself without anyone watching and commenting. And I think it's a brilliant journey you've been on.
Yeah, it's quite, I speak to my friend a lot about these things, and I've had 3 managerial jobs, obviously 1 assistant and asker, but I've actually got 2 of these jobs being out the country. By removing myself for whatever reason. and I've come back in, and it feels like when you do that, you know, I'd finished at St Mirren, had a bad time there, removed myself, got away from all the nonsense of, you know, people wanting to dig at you and all this just utter nonsense. And when you come back, you feel your energies change. It's different, and the mistakes that you've done in the past are, I wouldn't say irrelevant, but they're not. I mean, we don't dwell on mistakes because there's no point, because you need to go forward with your new team. And you know, it was at the time a big move for me, even going to the States for 3 months, and then Norway for 18. But it's worked out for me. So, you know, I can only you know, tell people good things about it, really.
Great. And just to finish with, if you had any, I suppose, messages or to players making that transition to managing and coaching, which is a difficult one for a lot of people, what would be your message for guys thinking about going to coaching and managing from playing?
Yeah, I think you know, with experience, you know, we all, of course, we need certain sort of badges to get to get jobs or apply for jobs. But you know, it's like anything. Don't get too ahead of yourself. You know, you need a job. Get what you need. Get your mistakes, or try and get your mistakes out as quick as you can. Not as many as I did. You know, and don't get too wrapped up. But you know, we've got everything now. We've got social media. We've got football on the telly all the time. We've got people talking about it, newspapers. Truthfully, what anybody else is doing is completely and utterly irrelevant. You can take little nitpicks from everybody, but you know, you need to be sure in your mind of what you're doing. And if you let other people influence, then it's going to cause you a lot of problems. And I think that's, when it comes down to the most important thing, keep your circle tight, really as tight as possible, and realise the ones around you who you want to be around you and who've got your back as well.
Oh yeah. So I really appreciate that's a great message to finish on, and I'll let you get off your run now then. Cheers,
enjoy
mate.
that.
Cheers.
Thanks, Don. Thank you.